This is CBC Here and Now.
Particular drill press, as a state, it can produce up to 20,000 pills within an hour.
Police show off its haul from a major drug bust, including some drug-making equipment.
That's why we won't tolerate anybody bringing anything in. There's not bumblebees or any other sort of bee is allowed to be imported into here.
To import or not to import, we take the Honeybee debate to the Isle of Man to find out why they have a complete ban on honeybee imports. Good evening and welcome to Here and Now. I'm Carolyn Stokes. Well, there will be no provincial apology for residential school survivors in Labrador for now. Premier Dwight Ball is backing down from a promise made more than 2.5 years ago.
We got it! We got it!
This was Tony Obed back in November 2017. That's when the federal apology to residential school survivors happened. Prime Minister Justin Trudeau visited Labrador and gave remarks to a crowded room. The Premier said the province would follow suit with an apology of its own. Now, as Ball prepares to step down as Premier, he's stepping back on his word. In a news release sent late today, the Premier's office said formal events planned to occur in 5 Labrador Inuit communities have been postponed and now cancelled altogether because of COVID-19. With Ball set to step down as Premier next month, he won't be able to make that apology. It will have to fall to the next Premier. The lawyer who represented almost 1,000 Labrador residential school survivors in the class action lawsuit says this cancellation is unacceptable.
This whole thing has really just re-victimized so many of the survivors. You know, they got that so important apology from the feds. It would have been so much better if the Premier had just kept his goddamn mouth shut and not offered to apologize in the first place. Because what he has done is he has created expectations that he has been pursuing for his own presumed political agenda, and seeming to be absolutely crass and careless about the feelings of the survivors, and to see their hope dash, their anger rise, their hopes dash the game is absolutely one of the most appalling set of circumstances that I've experienced in 30 years of representing people in these situations. It is absolutely atrocious, and the man should be ashamed. It's probably best now that Ball not give the opinion, because nobody's going to believe him. Why would the survivors believe a man who has lied to them about being in the process of delivering something and then just not following through, letting his mandate fall to the wayside and not carry out the promise?
Well, according to provincial officials, Nunatsiavut leaders agree with the decision to postpone the provincial apology, citing coronavirus concerns. John Abbott is calling for a new investigation into the information used by Andrew Furey at his campaign launch. He says convicted murderer Brandon Phillips was invited even though he's in prison. And Abbott insists the only way that could happen is if Furey had been given access to inside party info. Here Now's Peter Cowan joins us live to explain. So Peter, walk us through what this issue is.
Okay, I'll try and explain here why Brandon Phillips is a key character in this. So back in 2013, he was just a guy who was dating Dwight Ball's daughter. And Dwight Ball was running for the Liberal leadership race. But you can see him here. He is now in prison for murdering a man during a robbery at the Captain's Quarters Hotel. He had signed up in order to be part of the Liberal leadership race back in 2013 to be able to vote in it. And even though he was in prison, that didn't stop him from getting an email inviting him to Andrew Furey's campaign launch, at least according to Abbott. What Abbott is saying is the only way Phillips gets an invite is if someone was using Dwight Ball's supporter list from 2013. Now, in a statement, Premier Dwight Ball says, "Since the beginning of the 2020 leadership campaign, I've been contacted by some people with concerns around the use of their email, which they had not provided in the context of the current leadership campaign. I passed on these concerns to the party." Now, the person that he passed these concerns on to is John Sams, who is co-chairing the Liberal leadership campaign. And Sams tells us that Premier Dwight Ball did specifically raise Brandon Phillips and that email, but that they are not going to deal with it further. And here's why. He says, I had no reasonable evidence of the purported email's actual existence. I determined that even if the email existed, it was irrelevant and ultimately could only serve as superficial gossip in this context. Now, the party has already looked into this issue after several people raised concerns about their personal information being obtained by Fury in order to get invites to this launch that you see here on your screen. The party investigated and found that even if a volunteer had held on to the list from 2013, that didn't violate any of the rules. It's not considered an unfair advantage. But the key question in all of this, are volunteers hanging on to personal information from thousands of Liberal supporters? Abbott insists that's what's happening, but during the campaign launch in March, I asked Fury about this specifically, and he denied it. Here's what he said.
I apologize if anyone got an email invite to today by mistake or if it was unwanted. But really what happened was when I discussed with my team, there was a great deal of excitement, and they dipped into their contact lists and sent out an email. So I apologize if someone got it, but that's how it happened.
But does this mean people on your campaign have access
No,
and saved
certainly
copies
not.
of the past Liberal?
There's been no data breach here. No, certainly not.
Now, I did ask the campaign today to square that idea that they weren't using that information, and yet reportedly Brandon Phillips received that email and have not received a response. The campaign put out a statement saying that the party has essentially already dealt with this issue. What Abbott is asking for is he wants a full investigation into this before voting starts, and that's just 5 days away. But seeing as the party has already investigated, it does not seem likely that they're going to do another one. Carolyn?
Thanks so much, Peter. That's Here and Now's Peter Cowan reporting live. Well, there's a forest fire burning in Fermuse. The community is on Newfoundland's southern shore, about an hour-and-a-half drive from St. John's. Officials say the fire is burning about 3 hectares in size and about 2 kilometers outside of Fermuse. They're not sure right now if any cabins are at risk. 5 firefighters are on the ground. A second water bomber is flying in from Gander. A helicopter and another water bomber are already on site. Crews got the call about 3:30 this afternoon. Well, a 43-year-old St. John's man has died after a collision on Peacekeepers Way in Conception Bay South. The RNC says just after 11 o'clock last night, officers responded to a 2-vehicle collision on the highway between the Long Pond and Foxtrap access roads. The man was taken to hospital with serious injuries and was later pronounced dead. A woman driving the other vehicle involved was also taken to hospital to be treated for non-life-threatening injuries. Police are investigating what might have caused the crash. Anyone with information is asked to contact the RNC. Well, police are sending a warning to drug traffickers today that they should expect visits from officers in the near future. That's after a bust that the RNC calls Operation Rhino. It swept up drugs and, for the first time, some specialized equipment. Here Now's Garrett Berry explains.
$6 million worth of illicit drugs on the table.
Cocaine, MDMA, LSD, cannabis.
But the star of this show, this machine.
And this particular drill press, as a state, it can produce up to 20,000 pills within an hour. With this, of course, is potential of cross-contamination, the mass production of these pills. And this particular operation dismantled an organization in possession of this pill press, thus, of course, preventing the manufacturing and production of these pills.
Seized in a raid in June. Police won't say exactly where it was and can't say what it was making, but say it's a sign they are dealing with a complex criminal organization.
So it's not just the value that I want to emphasize, it's the fact that the pill press was seized, and this seizure, as I stated, being the first in the province.
These tables are the result of a 9-month investigation centered around that mass production.
Oh, it's our belief that these particular pills were being manufactured, produced, and sold to the illicit drug market within our province.
The investigation stretched into Nova Scotia. Police seized guns, cars, thousands in cash, and 700 pounds of cannabis.
They have associates not just within our province, but across Canada. We've been on this operation for several months, and based on information that we've collected, the investigative techniques that we've completed, we believe that this particular organized crime group is very complex.
Police have arrested 3 people in connection with these busts. Charges against them are still pending, so their names are not being released. Warren says that police have also identified more suspects in the case, so their work continues. Garrett Berry, CBC News, St. John's.
Emergency services at the Bay d'Espoir Medical Clinic are reopening Sunday after periodic protests from the community. Central Health says 2 physicians will staff the clinic in St. Albans on a rotating schedule. The ER has been closed for the better part of the last 15 weeks. Community outcry began in June. Without the clinic, ambulances had to travel to larger centers between 100 and 100 kilometers away. The new doctors will provide round-the-clock emergency care as well as daytime services. Central Health says attracting physicians to the area has been a constant issue. Well, hundreds of people packed in their cars and onto the streets of Deer Lake today. It was all in honor of Jody Golding. The 41-year-old died in a boating mishap Sunday night at Aldersteady Pond in the Goose Arm area of western Newfoundland. People in his hometown donned fishing gear and wrenches to remember Golding, a well-known outdoorsman and crafty mechanic. Following the funeral this afternoon, a procession of antique cars, including Golding's 1949 Chev pickup, weaved through the streets of town. Friends say Golding was adored by all, and while it's tragic to lose someone so young, he died doing something he loved. Police say Golding was wearing a life preserver when he was found, but it was not inflated. An investigation continues. Well, there's something in the water in Conception Bay other than whales, capelin, and codfish that's attracting attention. It's the Terra Nova FPSO. The oil-producing storage vessel is in the bay for a bit of work before tying up somewhere. Cesar reports.
3 football fields long, the FPSO is hard to miss in Conception Bay. It started producing oil in 2002, but hasn't produced a single drop since December, when a safety infraction shut it down, and production never resumed. Suncor Energy is the operator. Last May, it announced a plan to refit the vessel to extend its life for another 10 years, but the plan to send it to Spain was scrapped because of the pandemic. Where the FPSO goes next, the location and the duration is still being determined, according to the company. Some people in the industry say it'll either end up in Marystown, Argentia, or Bull Arm. It's in Conception Bay now because it needs a plate installed over the turret where underwater lines go inside the vessel. It all adds up to losses, lost jobs, lost taxes, lost royalties. For example, the province is losing out on hundreds of thousands of dollars a day in lost royalties when the Terra Nova is not producing. It also means lost jobs in businesses that supply products like food and water to the vessel. And it also means direct job losses on board the vessel. Dave Mercer with Unifor says about 120 union members are out of work right now because the Terra Nova is here in Conception Bay and not offshore producing oil. And he says the province loses out in income taxes and retail sales taxes. He says it all adds up, and that's why Unifor is part of this campaign to convince the governments, both level of governments, to help get the industry back to pre-pandemic production levels. Cease here, CBC News, Conception Bay.
Well, the RCMP handed out several $500 tickets and impounded vehicles after clocking drivers speeding on the Trans-Canada Highway near Butterpot Park earlier this week. Officers issued nearly 80 tickets. 10 of those were given to drivers going more than 50 kilometers above the speed limit. The speeds ranged between 150 and 170 kilometers an hour. Those 10 drivers were issued a fine of $520, had their driver's driver's license suspended and had their vehicles seized and impounded. Besides the hefty fine, the drivers also have to pay the towing and impound fees. Well, police in Mary's Harbor in Labrador are trying to figure out who stole a pickup truck over the weekend. This is all that was left to the truck when it was found. It used to be a brown Chevrolet Colorado pickup truck before it was stolen from a house in Mary's Harbor early Sunday morning. Police found it a short time later, about 5 kilometers away, engulfed in flames. The RCMP is hoping someone with information will come forward. Well, ultra-marathon runner Tim McDonough set his sights on running the entire East Coast Trail in a weekend, but he came up a little short. Despite running for hours on end, he could not complete the entire 330 kilometers from Topsail Beach to Cappahayden. Here Now's Jeremy Eaton caught up with the long-distance runner to chat about the attempt and what's next.
We started on Saturday at 4 a.m. and then I ran through that night and then ran the whole next day, and I finished up around 1:30 or something. Well, a lot of things went right, and that's usually the case until something goes wrong. It just sort of ended abruptly. Lost a bit of my wits. I had ran for quite some time without a whole lot of sleep. I made it about 203 or 4 kilometers. My watch logs a little differently than what the actual maps say.
Your partner Heather was stitching you up in one picture. Did you have a fall? Did you trip?
Well, I mean, there was some blowdown, so the trail's pretty rough as it is, and because the trees are down, if you're too tall, sometimes you got to duck underneath them, and this one I happened to actually accidentally catch.
Yeah.
See ya.
Some people find it challenging enough just to walk on the East Coast Trail. How hard is it to run on the East Coast Trail, Tim?
Well, it's got its challenges. A lot of it you can't really run, you have to sort of hike. You can do some power hiking on the steep hills where it's really rocky and really rooty. You got to be careful, especially with the cliffs overhanging the ocean right there. And at night it can be extra treacherous. At night, generally I'll have a headlamp so I can see. It's usually pretty bright. I do have a backup. Last thing you want to do is get stuck out there without a light. I used to run with headphones and I'd listen to scary Stephen King stories, and I feel like it messes with your head a bit at night when you're out there alone. It's nice to have some company, a pacer, a friend along for the ride. Generally, it's just nice to slow down a little bit, so you're a little safer. But I mean, the idea is to run it as fast as you can.
I'm not a very good runner, but I own a couple of pairs of running shoes. How many pairs of shoes did you bring for this, the journey across the East Coast Trail?
You don't really know what you're going to want to wear, because different shoes have different attributes, like everything. So I probably had about 20 pairs of shoes, and changed about 10 times. A fresh pair of socks and a new pair of shoes can, change your life.
Do you have a sponsor? Does anybody help you out with clothing and shoes? That's a lot of shoes.
Yeah, I got some gear from Arc'teryx for 2020, and it's helped me out quite a bit this summer. Running vests, shirts, and shorts, not to mention the shoes.
And how hard was it for you to give it up?
Oh, it was honestly pretty easy. I felt very proud of how far I went. It was a tough pill to swallow that I had to run for another 24 hours essentially. It was another 100 kilometers, and feeling the way I was feeling, practically falling asleep on my feet. It was a decision that had to be made, and I felt confident to finish, and that I would come back and probably do the whole thing with a better plan.
So what's next for you, Tim? I'm sure this isn't your last adventure. I'm sure you're already scheming or planning something else. What's next?
Well, there's a couple races I'm considering running this fall. In September, me and some friends are gonna take a boat out to Grey River and hike and run overland to Francois, it's called, and just do an adventure run out there. So, you get a backpack that you can run with, and you bring a tent and a sleeping bag, very lightweight stuff, and you know, try not to get rescued.
Say goodbye to the hot temperatures in the east. It cools down and gets wet tomorrow. Weather details are next.
This weather update is brought to you by Newfoundland and Labrador Tourism. This year, it's Stay Home Year, the year to rediscover home.
Time now for a look at the weather forecast, and it was another lovely day for most of the province today. Here's a look at the highs. Today, Labrador City got up to about 20 degrees. On the island, much warmer there. Stephenville 25, St. John's 24 with lots of sunshine. It was just a lovely day. Unfortunately, things are going to change slightly tomorrow. But first, let's look at tonight. We do have some showers pushing through Labrador as well as the southern part of the island tonight. So St. John's could get some showers with an overnight low of 15 degrees. Marystown looking at about 2 to 4 millimeters of rain tonight. pretty much clear skies for central areas. Grand Falls, Windsor looking at 16 degrees overnight tonight. Now in Labrador, chance of some thunder showers for Lab City, Happy Valley, Goose Bay, and the Cartwright area. Temperatures in the mid-teens overnight tonight with some pretty light winds. So looking ahead now to tomorrow, we have some showers for Labrador once again and some heavier rain for parts of the island. Just a closer look at this timeline here. We have the Burin Peninsula should start to see that heavier rain about 10 a.m. tomorrow morning, and then that'll push ahead to the Avalon Peninsula around lunchtime. So that's when we should see the heaviest rain in that particular area. So as for amounts, looking at about 10 to 20 millimeters for the St. John's area, and yeah, look at that temperature, 15 degrees. We've been a bit spoiled lately with some of the warm temperatures this week, so a bit of a cool down tomorrow. 15 to 25 millimeters for the southern Avalon and the Marystown area. Clarenville a little bit less up there, 5 millimeters of rain. So for central areas, could see some showers throughout the day in the afternoon, rather. Grand Falls, Windsor looking at 22 degrees. Harbour Breton, some heavier rain down in that area, 5 to 10 millimeters there, 19 as the high along the coast. For the west coast, mostly cloudy skies for the Corner Brook area, Humber Valley, 22 degrees, a chance of showers in the Port aux Basques, Stephenville area. Up in the Straits, St. Anthony looking at a beautiful day, 24 degrees with lots of sunshine. But as you move north to southeastern Labrador, looking at a chance of some thunder showers tomorrow for Mary's Harbour and Cartwright, and some very warm temperatures. It's going to be sticky in Mary's Harbour tomorrow. The humidex around 28 degrees there. So for the rest of Labrador, Nain, a chance of showers there, 16 degrees. We still have that risk of thunder showers for Happy Valley, Goose Bay, temperatures in the mid-20s. Labrador City looking at some heavier rain there, about 5 millimeters coming there. So now we're into the weekend. This is how things should play out. Looking like Saturday will probably be the better day on the island. You can see those showers moving in later in the day, but for the majority of the day on Saturday, looking at a mix of sun and cloud, 22 degrees for St. John's. A chance of those late afternoon showers for Central, 26 degrees in Grand Falls, Windsor, and for Labrador, cool down in Nain, 10 degrees on Saturday. In Lab City, looking at some showers there, and 18 as the high on Saturday. So lots of rain then. For Sunday on the island, it'll be a wet one for sure. In St. John's, 19 degrees as the high. Temperatures around that range for pretty much the whole island on Sunday, with that rain persisting. Happy Valley, Goose Bay looking at mostly cloudy skies and 19 degrees. Lab City looking like the nicest spot actually on Sunday, 20 degrees with a mix of sun and clouds. So looking into the long range, looks like we're in for a wet one next week. Temperatures much cooler than what we've been used to as well. 19 on Sunday, and then we're staying in the mid to upper teens to start off the work week with some rain. Similar story for Central, slightly warmer there, but that rain persisting for Western Newfoundland. Starting to clear on Tuesday there with 20 degrees as the high. In Labrador, looking at rain on Monday for Eastern Labrador and some cloudy skies on Tuesday, and some clearing there in Western Labrador, and temperatures starting to bump up again on Tuesday with some cloudy skies. So let's have a look at our weather photo of the day, and this is from a fairly regular contributor to Here and Now. This is a beautiful shot in Job's Cove on Conception Bay North. Beautiful wildflowers. Eugene Howell sent this in to us. He called it Nature's Morning Painting. So thank you so much, Eugene. It's a beautiful shot. Well, a new climate change study outlines how rising levels of carbon dioxide in the atmosphere dramatically increase the impact of global warming. And it estimates unless greenhouse gas emissions are steadily and significantly reduced, CO2 levels will double by 2080. But action will require public pressure.
If you say, I don't want the governments to do anything, then we're going to have a lot of climate change, and there's going to be a lot of suffering.
The study under the Geneva-based World Climate Research Program says current trends put the world on course for increasingly severe climate impacts. Under its projections, it says the Paris Accord target of limiting warming to 1.5 degrees will not be met. The findings show a doubling of CO2 levels could actually hike global warming by more than 4 degrees. Average global temperatures have already warmed by 1.2 degrees Celsius. There will be a review into the worst mass shooting in Canada's history this spring in Nova Scotia, but it's not the public inquiry the families of the victims and many others have been calling for. Instead, a three-person panel will try to get to the bottom of what happened. Tom Murphy reports.
The review will be conducted by a panel of three: former Nova Scotia Chief Justice Michael MacDonald, former Federal Justice Minister Anne McClellan, and retired Fredericton Police Chief Leanne Fitch.
The strength of the panel, given the authority that they have, will get the answers they need.
Here's some of what the independent review will look at: the role that intimate partner violence played in the lead-up to the shooting, the gunman's access to firearms, his relationship and interactions with the RCMP. It will also review the police tactics and decisions made the day of the shooting, and it will examine how police communicated with the public as the tragedy was unfolding and in the days that followed.
People wanted independence. They wanted transparency, they wanted accountability, and they wanted impartiality. Those are the same core attributes of an inquiry.
But there will be no power of subpoena that would normally come with a full public inquiry. Rather, the Federal Public Safety Minister and the Provincial Justice Minister, themselves retired police officers, will, in their words, ensure the review panel has what it needs to carry out its mandate.
You know, the RCMP is also very, very keen to ensure that all of the facts of these circumstances are made known, and as well also keen that there are lessons that can be learned.
The review, which the ministers say will get answers more quickly than an inquiry, will also look at police training for intimate partner violence and active shooter situations. It will also investigate how police dispose of their vehicles and other equipment and clothing. But all documents and information collected by the review panel will be kept confidential, and the recommendations are not binding. An interim report will be filed in February, with the final report made public in August of 2021. Tom Murphy, CBC News, Halifax.
We know very well that if I get a colony of bees from somebody here, it's virtually disease-free.
The debate over honeybees continues. A beekeeper from the Isle of Man explains why they don't import bees. That's coming up next. There is a great divide among beekeepers in this province over the importation of honeybees. Some support it, some do not. Right now, it's illegal to bring bees into this province unless you get a special permit from government. Beekeepers who get the permit can import bees, but only from Western Australia. So, what makes those particular bees so special? Well, Western Australia is one of very few places left on the planet that does not have a vicious parasite called the varroa mite that destroys honeybee populations. The island of Newfoundland also belongs to that exclusive club. There have never been any reports of varroa mite here. Now, there is another island in the world that shares that rare fortune. The Isle of Man can also boast varroa-free status, but unlike Newfoundland, bee importation is totally banned there. No permits will be granted under any circumstance. Joining me now is the president of the Beekeepers Federation on the Isle of Man, Harry Owens. But before we get started, I just should point out something else our islands have in common. We both have a St. John's. I'm in St. John's, Newfoundland, and Mr. Owens, you're in St. John's, Isle of Man.
Yes, I am. I live in St. John's. Yeah.
Well, why don't we just get right into it and talk about bees? Why is it so special to have the distinction of being a place that does not have the varroa mite?
One of the greatest, the beauties, I would say, of keeping bees here in the Isle of Man, which is varroa-free, is that we still use the old style of beekeeping. We haven't got to use all those preventative methods and putting in varroicides into the hives, etc. We know very well that if I get a colony of bees from somebody here, it's virtually disease-free. And the reason is that we prohibited bees from 1987. We had the Bees Act, and it was an act actually prohibiting the importation of bees because of foul brood, which is a dreadful thing. You have to kill the bees off. There's no proper way of dealing with the foul brood infestation. At that time, they were starting to appear the varroa mite. Varroa mite brings all the viruses. There's 15 plus viruses it can bring in.
Government says that they have this rigorous process in place that we can only import bees from Western Australia, which is designated varroa mite free. The hives will be inspected rigorously, put into quarantine for a year. Is that rigorous enough, do you think?
It's all very well saying, oh, let's bring them in and we'll guarantee and isolate them and all that, but how can you prove that?
Are there any checks and balances that you think could be put in place that would make you feel confident enough to import bees into Isle of Man?
I don't feel confident at all. As far as I'm concerned, I wouldn't allow anything in to possibly give you something you can't. Once you get it, you can't get away from it. It's like varroa. Once varroa is in, that's it forever. And you know, your beekeeping will change from the leisurely type of beekeeping you do now to caution and chemicals and goodness knows what. So yeah, I'm against it.
Is there much of a commercial beekeeping industry in Isle of Man? And I ask because, I think that's one of the big issues with this province.
Yeah, I know that.
There are some commercial industries that really require the services of honeybees to pollinate their crops and to bolster their business. So do you think that's enough of a reason to allow the importation of bees? Because there are businesses, there are industries that rely on growing the bee population?
I don't think it's a good idea. Why? I mean, we look after ourselves. We can breed queens and colonies up here, no problem whatsoever. Why can't they breed the stocks in local bees which are climatized for starters and disease-free or free of any other than what they've already got, if you know what I mean?
What would happen to our bee population if a hive is imported and it has either, a varroa mite or some other disease on it? How quickly could that potentially spread to our bees, and how devastating could it be to our local bee populations?
Well, I can tell you now, if varroa came in, you'd never get rid of it, and it would rapidly infect everything in sight. Think about the multiplication. It's like the pandemic. You infect one and four make more. You know what I mean? It's a vicious thing.
From where you stand, do you have any kind of message that you would like to relay to our government about this issue, or just to people who don't really understand the concerns behind the importation of bees? What would your message be?
Well, my message is most definitely don't bring bees from anywhere else in. What you've got, contain it.
Well, Harry Owens, I really appreciate you taking the time to speak with us about this. I feel like I could talk to you about bees all day long.
Yeah.
And it was such a pleasure to learn more about your corner of the world. Thank you so much.
It's God's own country, you know.
Just like here.
It's been a delight to talk to you, Caroline.
Oh,
and,
you too.
I'm so pleased.
So what is the plan for bee importation? Well, the Department of Fisheries and Land Resources says no application for bee importation has been received and none is expected. Importation would only be considered under exceptional circumstances and only when bees could not be supplied locally. Now, an example of an exceptional circumstance would be if a commercial beekeeper lost the majority of their colonies and could not replenish their stock with local honeybees. Welcome back. The summer theater season would normally be in full swing by now, but this year things are different. The Trinity pageant has been able to reopen, and we'll show you that in just a moment, but other small theaters have to keep their doors closed. Anthony recently spoke with Kathy Hodder from the Beaches Arts and Heritage Center about how this year looks.
So, Kathy, tell me about this place. What is this?
This is the Beaches Arts and Heritage Center, and it opened as this in 2001. Prior to that, it had been the school. So you're actually in what was at one time the school building of the elementary school for Eastport. Right now, this is a summer theater. Outside the theater, we have a full gallery, art gallery. We use it for performances of every type, music, plays, festivals. We have two huge festivals each summer. One is the Roy Babstock Beaches Accordion Festival, and then in August we have the Winterset in Summer Literary Festival. And naturally both of those festivals have been canceled for this year.
What has the impact been, or what is the impact of COVID-19 on this place?
The impact is that we don't have a season this year. Now, this center is not what we know as a government arts and culture center. We're a small facility. We do not get government operating funds. We are open normally from May 1st till the end of October. We run the bulk of our programming July, August, September to Thanksgiving. Because our season is finished, we won't have the operating revenue to cover our fixed cost. And so right now, I'm the treasurer, and right now we are looking for ways to fund our fixed costs because we want this place to be alive next year, and every year going forward.
How important is this center in your estimation?
Well, the center is a huge draw for tourists and actually a large number of summer residents who chosen the peninsula for their summer homes. And we bring in a lot of people. We have got cabins and B&Bs that I feel that this center contributes to their business model as well as to other things such as, festivals and anything else that we do in terms of programming.
So even if you could open, how could you actually make enough money given you can't fill the seats?
Well, that would be the big issue because if this theater accommodates nearly 200, if we have just 50, you would have to have a very stiff ticket price, or you would lose money on the performance. And we can't afford to lose money right now on any performance. And the worry is that if you get a second wave or a third wave of COVID, 2021 starts to look unpleasant. But we are planning to be open for 2021, God willing.
Well, many theater companies, like the one in Eastport, have had to shut their operations due to COVID. Even Broadway in New York hasn't been immune to the pandemic, but one theater company has managed to stay alive. The town of Trinity is ringing in the 43rd season of Rising Tide Theater.
The boys are repairing the flake now. Let's have a go before the old man is back.
And Rick and I wrote the pageant and brought it here and started in 1993. People said that we were crazy. And how is that going to work? And who's ever going to go to Trinity to watch theater? So now in 2020, I'm trying to run with an amazing, beautiful, fabulous, brave team of people. We're trying to do theater in the middle of COVID. So people still say I'm crazy. So little has changed. We're having obviously much smaller audiences as we try to get the word out because we didn't think we were going to be able to perform. So there are lots of challenges because you have to keep your audience a little further away, but they're also smaller. So you have to adapt on the stage and in the outdoors. Usually the company is 45 in total. That's everybody who works here. So now we have about, half that number. And so we're all, working really, really hard to bring all our talents to the table in every possible way that we can. But I'll tell you, we will give you all we've got if you come.
Nothing wrong with that, is it, Megan?
Yes, you'll get some fright now. All three of them says yes.
So I think it's really important. The arts are part of what I hope will help us all as we move forward, because they bring joy and they bring laughter. Sometimes they bring sadness and pain, but they bring everything with people right before you, speaking with you. And I think that, arts we've never been afraid of challenge or change ever. I think never. And this is a good time to prove that we're not afraid now.
And continuing on with the Trinity pageant, you heard it began more than 25 years ago, much to the delight of tourists and local residents. Well, we decided to dig into our archives and bring you this story from 1994 when the Trinity pageant opened. Here's former CBC reporter Tonda McCharles.
So it was a mistake that we were discovered. An accident. Yes, and it's been an accident ever since.
All summer, these storytellers, a seaman and his sidekick, have spun tales, cracked jokes, and steered thousands through the Trinity pageant, a theatrical slice of 500 years of Newfoundland history.
Sue me, Johnny Poker, ho!
With some financial help from Ottawa and the province, it opened as a job and tourism project last summer. It's been a hit ever since.
Weekends we get like 450, 500.
Rising Tide Theatre director Donna Butt admits meeting some resistance at first. Tourism, many felt, would never replace the fishery.
I agree with them. This coast is absolutely devastated. It's an absolute outrage, and they should be terribly angry. But if we are going to do something that is related to tourism, at least let it be something of them, about them, and by them.
And that's what has made this work. The pageant has become something people all around Trinity are very proud of. 28 acting and production jobs have been created. Evening plays keep visitors overnight, and Trinity's been transformed. Restaurants, gift shops, bed and breakfasts have opened. On pageant nights, rooms are scarce.
It was over 400 people.
That you turned away?
That I turned away, yes.
We have employed 13 people. That would not have been possible. Those people would not be employed if it weren't for the pageant.
It's a ribald, witty, and moving production. The audience wends its way through the village into the memories of Trinity's past.
God save you, Jacob. You wait and see.
Spectators become voyeur and players themselves. They mourn the loss of 24 Trinity sealers.
You are to be taken around and placed in the stocks until you learn to control that tongue of yours.
They revel at the fate of the town gossip.
Mr. Sweetland, sir, I know something about you, and your wife ain't gonna like it anymore.
We are businessmen, Mr. Bremner. We're not a charity.
In this play, the villains are greedy merchants. The heroes, fishing families who starved.
I worked in a crab plant before.
Beyond economics and theatrics, it's given these actors much more than a job.
Oh, it's give every one of us the group, a lot more self-esteem and makes people want to do more.
It's so good to have a job in your life that you really, really enjoy.
Yeah.
Donna Butt wanted this project to have a lasting impact, and chances are good it will. These local actors have formed their own theater company to develop new productions for the area, and they vow this is an industry that will survive. Tonda McCharles, CBC News, Trinity, Newfoundland.
Welcome back. The Summer Olympics were supposed to start tomorrow, but because of the COVID-19 pandemic, they're now rescheduled to start a year from today. But to mark the date, organizers held a ceremony in the host city of Tokyo. It was a short, low-key event inside a new national stadium. No spectators attended. Despite today's ceremony, there is concern the games might not go ahead as planned. The head of Tokyo's organizing committee says competition won't take place unless the status quo improves in terms of COVID-19. Well, before we finish tonight, here's a quick weather recap for you. If you're in the east, be sure to grab a raincoat for tomorrow. A cool down is coming for St. John's, 15 degrees as the high tomorrow with about 10 to 20 millimeters of rain on the way. For Grand Falls, Windsor, Gander, looking at a chance of some showers there tomorrow. Warmer, 22 degrees there. Corner Brook looking at mostly a cloudy day with 22 as the high. St. Anthony looking at a lovely day tomorrow with lots of sunshine. For Labrador, Cartwright, Happy Valley, Goose Bay could see a thunder shower tomorrow. Temperatures warm, 24 degrees there, 19 in Lab City. Well, that's it for us tonight. Thank you so much for joining us. Hope you can join us again tomorrow evening. Good night.